Hello, this is Jeff Risdon with Detroit Lions Podcast and Lions Wire, and we are doing something a little bit different today. We're doing a video mailbag, and it's special for the Patreon members of the Detroit Lions Podcast. We have our own Slack channel, and I posted in there that you can ask me questions, and I will answer them via video. You can participate in the Slack by being a Patreon contributor to the Detroit Lions Podcast. It costs just $1 a month or more if you want to give that. And that's something that we're going to try to do a little bit more for the people who do it. But you all get to benefit today from the questions that were asked in there. So here we go. First up, I had a question from Anand. He asked, is Godwin Igwebuike's move to running back because he wasn't cutting it at safety? Is it another way besides special teams that they can justify having him on the roster? And does he have the athleticism to pull it off? Igwebuike was not cutting it at safety, to answer that part of it. It was pretty clear he was well down on the rep list, just wasn't doing anything special with the reps that he was getting. He was a high school running back, and apparently a quite good one. He got recruited to Northwestern as a running back. He did run for over, I think it was 2,000 yards in his last two seasons in high school football in Cincinnati. So he has the chance to do it, but realistically, he's on the team to try to make it as a special teamer. He is not going to be one of the top three running backs. I think that's pretty clear. His work is going to be either as a return man, and he got a little bit of a glimpse at that on Friday night in the preseason game, or working on special teams on coverage units as a gunner and things like that. And he's seen a lot of action at that in practice. Will it make him the roster? It's iffy. He's bounced around a little bit, so it's probably a better chance for him to make it there at running back, honestly, than it is at defensive back. But having seen what we saw in the Bills game, and keep in mind these questions that are here, they came in from before the game, and most of them will deal with the situations that were happening before we saw the preseason game. After what we saw last night from Craig Reynolds and from Dedrick Mills, I don't think that there's much of a future for Igwebuike at running back either. Moving on, another one, question about Bobby Price. So this, again, came in before Friday night's game, and Bobby Price was down there at the safety. He was probably dead last, quite honestly, on the safety depth chart. He might have been above Elijah Holder, but it just there was nothing about him that stood out at safety other than, oh my God, that guy's a really good athlete. Well, Dan Campbell talked about it in his post-game press conference, and we saw it last night in the game. He has the build of a cornerback, an outside cornerback at 6'3", a little over 200 pounds. He can fly. He's a great athlete. He can leap out of the building. So there's a real chance for him to convert to a cornerback and make it work. We saw some good plays and some bad plays. Remember, he'd only been playing cornerback for, I believe it was 2 days of practice, because he did not participate in, I was at Monday's practice, and he did not play corner there. He was still playing safety then. So, it's a very recent change. It's for the best for him, and as Dan Campbell said after the game, his value is going to be on special teams. That's how he's going to stick on the roster. I'll say this for Bobby Price. With the way that the little bit of potential that we saw in the game against Buffalo at cornerback, he's definitely making the practice squad. This is his second year as an undrafted free agent out of Norfolk State. Not expecting to stick around and be one of those guys who could be called up in a specific week if they're playing a team that's very pass happy and has a lot of size on the outside, because he certainly has the size to do it. He obviously needs the technical work, but this definitely helps Bobby Price stick around on the Lions roster. Probably not on the 53, but I think on the practice squad, and he could be a guy that winds up being protected every now and then too. So good for Bobby Price, number 47 out there. He's an easy guy to root for, and he might be the best athlete on the team. Move on to a couple other ones here. Does Charles Harris have a realistic path to the roster? This is a very good question, and it's something that we talked about. I talked about it with a Lions team source at practice the other day, and I brought up various roster projections that I was toying around with, and I mentioned Charles Harris as being on the roster bubble, and was very quickly and curtly corrected that, Charles Harris is making the roster. Like why would you dare think that he wouldn't? I will defer to my source on that one. Personally, I don't see it. I don't get it. Harris has not done a lot in camp. He does okay. but he's certainly not any better than Robert McRae or some of the other guys that are working those latter reps. He does have first round pedigree. He does have length. I know that the Lions do appreciate having length on the outside. He can sort of play the run. He's not as completely one dimensional as Miami fans would have you believe after he washed out there. But I expect him to make it based on what I've heard, though not necessarily what I would agree with. That's part of football. Yeah, you can't always get what you want. A couple other things here. Question from Joe D'Alessandri. This one's more wide arcing. What do you think is the absolute worst case way this coming season could play out for the Detroit Lions? I think the worst case would probably be. It's a good question because I don't think that they're going to be very good, but I think threatening to be good. Let's say after 7 games they're 3-4. And they are realistically within the expanded playoff push. I worry that they will then, really gun for it and try guns out to get it, and they come up short and they wind up being 8-9 or 7-10 or even 9-8, and don't make the postseason. Then you've really hurt your draft prospects with your first round pick, and you also didn't get to the playoffs, and it also. In a way, it kind of dooms you to be stuck with what you have, because if you're trying to make the playoffs, that's one thing. This team, obviously they're going to say that they want to make the playoffs, but realistically they know that their playoff window starts in 2022 and beyond. So getting close this year, I worry that will give them a little bit of false confidence. I worry that will take away some of the underdog edge. You can rise very quickly, and I think that they have the ability to do that in 2022 and beyond. But this year, I think, honestly, I'd rather see them go, 4-13 than I would 8-9. That's just me. So that would probably be the worst, and also injuries. You don't want anybody who's part of the long-term future. That would be T.J. Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, any of the guys on the defense, the young guys on the defense. Guys like Elaine McNeil, Tracy Walker. Derek Barnes, any of those guys, you don't want them to get injuries that would linger into another season. So that would probably be the worst case. Hopefully that answers it. It's kind of a waffle question, but I don't know. It's early yet, so I'm not looking full season thing. All right, from my guy Big Bad Fab. As far as adding players, what do you think they will? What positions do you think they will rotate guys on and off the roster during camp, and specifically for guys on the waiver wire as cutdowns come? Good question. This is something that we have talked about in the Slack, and we've discussed it quite a bit in there. I will say I do not think that at least one of the wide receivers who's on the final roster is currently in Detroit, and I will also say that one or two of the backup offensive linemen who will make the final 53-man roster and will be out there week 1 against San Francisco, they're not on the roster either. The interior offensive line depth has been rough. There is some promise. I actually did like what I saw from Logan Stenberg in the Buffalo Bills game. Outside of 1 rep, I thought he played pretty well, and that's important because he could definitely change that dynamic there and be one of them. But I think you're going to see wide receiver shuffle around. Running back, I know Craig Reynolds was phenomenal against Buffalo. He just got into town. We got to see more of that. The bottom of the running back roster has already been shifted over several times. That's more of a function of injuries than anything else, but that's something to keep an eye on. And the defensive line, P.J. Johnson's back. P.J. Johnson could be gone by the time you watch this. And that's just the nature of being at the bottom of the interior defensive line rotation. And it wouldn't surprise me if they look to find somebody there who could possibly help. But and then wide receiver, obviously. I don't think that any of the depth guys, and specifically the undrafted free agents that I think a lot of us had a lot of promise in Sage Surratt and Javon McKinley, just haven't panned out as well as expected. It doesn't mean that they don't belong in a practice squad, but I don't think that they're gonna wow anybody enough to make the 53-man roster. And I could see them bringing in, especially when other cuts happen around the league, you're going to see guys who are better than the number 3, number 4, number 5 wide receivers in Detroit getting cut elsewhere. I definitely see at least one of them being brought in. All right. From Chad Hale. Based on what you've seen in training camp, do you think our linebackers will have trouble in coverage this season? I imagine the addition of Alex Anzalone will be a big help there. They are definitely a lot better than they have been in the past in coverage. It's not perfect. It's not locked down by any means, but I'll say this. Jamie Collins is so smart in space. It's very difficult to fool him to get him out of space when he's facing, when he's in zone, facing the quarterback, looking and diagnosing the play. He's just really, really good in coverage. And you saw that when he was in Cleveland. You saw that when he was in New England. Did not see it at all last year. I expect much better things out of him. Anzalone is okay. He's actually better in man coverage than he is in zone. It's not great, but it's serviceable. It's passable. Again, it's better than what we had last year in Detroit. From depth, this is actually where it could get really good. Sean John Hamilton has been phenomenal in coverage in training camp, and that's why he's a fairly solid prediction to make the final roster. Derek Barnes, not necessarily a great in coverage, but he showed at the Senior Bowl he does have some potential there, and from what little we've seen of him in camp because he's been injured, he's not lost out in space. So yeah, I do think it's going to be a lot better. Is it going to be top of the league, top of the charts? No. Is it going to elevate the defense from being 32nd in pass defense to maybe 20th? Yeah, that could absolutely happen. And the linebackers will be a big part of that. And their ability to also rush, specifically guys like Collins and Barnes, who are able to rush from the inside but also drop in coverage. I think that presents a lot more dynamics that the offense has to deal with, and I think that's going to be a very positive development. All right, from Scott Carroll. If you had to revamp the wide receiver room such that it was in a position next year to allow us to compete, what approach would you take? Would you do big free agent spending, larger focus on the draft? And do you think this is something feasible? And I'm going to tie this in because there's another question that's somewhat related to it from my guy Wisco Boiler. Hi, Kevin. With the addition of a true number one wide receiver and a Goff returning to form, drafting a quarterback changed the entire perception of the offense. We'll focus on the receiver part of that. I don't want to get too much into Goff because I don't want to raise my blood pressure or say anything that I might regret later. They absolutely have to address wide receiver. I would like to see them, because they're going to have some money, go out and get a big name wide receiver. And unfortunately, I don't know who else is going to be a free agent at this point. It's tough to project that far. But I would love to see them be very aggressive in chasing one of the top free agents on the market and also using one of their first 3 draft picks. Remember, they have their own first round pick, they have the Rams first round pick, and then they have their own second round pick. All of those should be in the top 45 picks. One of those picks had better be a wide receiver. I feel like they've struck pay dirt with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I've said this, if you've heard me on the podcast, if you've heard me in various radio interviews, I think he's limited in what he can do as a ceiling, but my goodness, his floor is so high. This is a guy who's going to catch a tremendous amount of passes and be a real asset and a very good weapon. I would love for them to get a premium weapon on the outside to play with him, to run combo routes, tandem things, and do gimmicks. I think Amon-Ra is smart enough to handle that and talented enough to handle that. I would really love to see that. Tyrell Williams has a chance to be solid. But again, this is a guy who's been a career number 3 or a number 2 outside wide receiver. You're asking him to be your alpha dog. That's just not what he is. There's no reason to think that he can't have a good season with Goff, and we've seen them having good connections in training camp. But yeah, I would to answer Scott's question, I would say both. Put those hands together, baby. Give me 2 more good wide receivers to work with and improve TJ Hawkinson to grow with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think we might really have something, whether Goff or the next quarterback after him winds up being good. I do think that would absolutely change the dynamic and the perception of the offense. Maybe not just locally, but also nationally, where if you go out there and you read what people are saying about the Lions offense, specifically the passing offense, you're probably not going to like it. But it's a hard dose of reality right now. I've said this before again on the podcast, but it bears repeating. This is the worst passing offense camp I've been in since I was at the Browns winless year in 2017, when their quarterback was Kevin Hogan, Brock Osweiler, Deshaun Kaiser, and Cody Kessler, throwing to Kenny Britt, Corey Coleman, and a bunch of guys who never even lasted more than a cup of coffee in the NFL. This isn't that bad, but it's not great, guys. What we saw in Buffalo, I think, is a very good example of it. We saw the first drive was dreadful, 3 and out, nothing worked. Second drive, you saw Goff Goff had time to throw. He set his feet. He threw sharp timing routes, which he can do. I think that's where his bread and butter is. You saw some both Williams and St. Brown forced to miss tackle, gained extra yards in space. That's where this offense is going to thrive. Personally, I want something a little bit more dynamic than that, and I think that most national analysts will want something more than that. Goff hasn't shown that he can do that yet. Hasn't done that in a couple of years in Los Angeles. Based on what we've seen in camp, it's probably not going to happen in Detroit either. Who knows? We reserve the right to change our minds there, but until proven otherwise, you gotta significantly upgrade the wide receivers, especially if you want Goff to work long term. Scott also added a bonus question, and for those of you who know me well, I'm a massive music fan. I'm almost always listening to music. I don't really watch TV. He wanted to know, who's your favorite hard rock metal guitarist? His favorite has always been Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads just got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a contributor, which is a great thing. I'm a big fan of Randy's. My personal favorite is John Petrucci of Dream Theater. I love his versatility. I love the fact that he can do any genre. They play thrash, they play speed, they play hardcore. He can play gent. He can do acoustic. Some of the softer stuff that he plays, and his solo stuff is just incredible too. If you want to go back in time, back when I was rocking the longer hair back in the 80s when I was in high school, I was a massive George Lynch fan from Dokken. That was my band, and George was my guitarist, and he's still putting out some really good music too. So there you go. Thanks for the comfortable diversion there. From my guy Greg Warren, Greg, who I attended the draft this year in Cleveland with, and has become a good friend. He wanted to know, based on what you've seen and heard, does this regime seem more likely to eschew bringing in veteran talents after cuts to promote more playing time for the young guys? I hope so. I want to see. I wrote a thing for Lions Wire earlier in the summer about how they need to stress player development, and I think this is a staff that's more cognizant and aware that they need to develop players. That they can't just go out there and be tacticians or motivators. They actually have to be teachers. I think that's one of the assets of having all the ex-players as coaches on your coaching staff. The players who are here, by and large, when Matt Patricia was in town, they didn't really pay a lot of attention to development. I think that's the opposite vibe of what you get. And the players who were left over, this is what Dan Campbell was talking about when he said that there were no turds left over by the prior regime. He's talking about these are guys that want to work, that want to get better. They want to help the Lions get better, and they want to be coached. They want to show that they belong. They want to show what they can do. They did not get that opportunity under the prior staff. And some of that was moves like signing Adrian Peterson to come in. When you have Kerryon Johnson, when you have DeAndre Swift, it didn't make a lot of sense. That's stunning your player development. As much as Peterson helped Swift, and Swift will tell you that he helped him, it's different than getting the reps. That's one of the reasons why I was so hardcore against signing Todd Gurley earlier this offseason. It's one of the reasons why I didn't really want Charles Harris to make the final roster, but as we talked about earlier, that seems like that's going to happen. Yes, I do want to see, especially if it's late in the game, if the game is, the Lions are down by 2 touchdowns and it's the fourth quarter and honestly not a lot is working, I want to see Derek Barnes out there instead of Jamie Collins. I want to see Amon-Ra St. Brown taking all the reps at wide receiver. I want to see Jamar Jefferson get some carries. I want to see anybody on the offensive line depth, whether it's Evan Brown or Logan Stenberg or anybody, get some reps in there. Don't just play your starting 5 all the time. See what you've got. Bring along guys like A.J. Parker and Jerry Jacobs, the undrafted rookie free agents. One of those guys is going to make the team, by the way. Probably is going to be A.J., based on what we've seen from him in camp rather. But I want to see those guys actually get playing time in games so they develop some. Not just because, yes, it's great that they're getting the practice reps and that they're going to be involved in that. But I would really love to see the emphasis on development. That's a big thing for me. So thank you for that, Greg. And also to answer your question, I am a Hailstorm fan. They were actually my first concert that I saw after my open heart surgery. I went to see them about 2 months afterwards, and they were phenomenal in concert. I actually have kind of grown away from their music. I've gone a little bit more hardcore, and their music sort of zagged in the opposite direction. But Lizzie Hill definitely has a great voice and is a very good performer. And also, she's just a phenomenal interview. If you ever get a chance to hear interviews with her, she's a really smart girl and a powerful voice for ladies in rock, and I definitely appreciate that. Even though I'm not the hugest fan of their music, I like their older stuff better. Their cover of Slave to the Grind, though. Thumbs up on that. Looks like the last question here from Maddie in a World of Mats. That's a great screen name, by the way. What group do you think will be the best out of our defense? The defensive line, the middle of the field, or the secondary? I really like the defensive line. I love Aleem McNeil. I think he's going to be the most valuable rookie. That's my early prediction. Certainly on the defensive side of the ball, I think St. Brown might have something to say about that on offense. But I'm very enamored with what he offers. I think John Pennicini, when he's been healthy, has shown that he belongs on the field. Michael Brockers does not get enough credit. To go back to Greg's question for a second, one of the reasons why Michael Brockers is in Detroit is because he thrives on teaching the young guys and being a veteran mentor, but he can also still really play. And I think he's going to help guys like Levi Onwuzurike and Jayshon Cornell, who's had a decent camp. He's going to help those guys become better players. He might take some reps from them, but he's also going to be helping them. And you see it all the time in practice. Brockers is talking to the guys right there with the coaches. After they take the reps, they want feedback on it. Julian Okwara has been the same way, going to him a lot. And that sort of advice from a guy like Brockers, such a well-respected veteran, that's invaluable for the team. So that's where we're at. That will wrap, I think, the first edition of the mailbag here. But thanks for sending in the questions, guys. Again, you can get into it on the Detroit Lions podcast Slack channel via Patreon. Check out our latest show. We are scheduled to have Jerry Jacobs, the undrafted rookie free agent cornerback, with us on Monday night or Tuesday night. Check your times because I don't know exactly what time it will be yet. And again, follow along on Lions Wire for all the day-to-day covering. I will be back out at practice at least a couple of days this week, and hope to be seeing a lot more of you as the time goes on. Thank you.